Welcome back to the Charity Matters podcast. I'm Heidi Johnson, lifelong helper, nonprofit founder, and your host. I've been interviewing the helpers for a decade with my blog, and I'm so excited to now be sharing these inspiring conversations on our podcast. Join me as we learn the challenges and stories of innovators, entrepreneurs, and modern-day heroes who set out to solve the problems of humanity. Today, our guests are the founders of the nonprofit R-Wave, Kyle Linton and Sinko. It was an online platform for survivors of sexual assault to share their stories, receive support, and find a community for healing. While this is sometimes an uncomfortable topic, it's an important conversation, and I think hearing Kyle and Laura's personal journeys will be inspiring for everybody.
To me, my heroes are people like you all, that both of you, that spend their life serving others. And to me, those are the real heroes of the world. And I thought that way long before Heroes Among Us and People Magazine and CNN. I just believe that people are changing the world, doing great things every day. And I want everyone to know your story. So that's kind of why I do this. It's my guilty pleasure. And I want to learn really, first and foremost, like what our Wave does. I've obviously seen your website, but I'd love to hear from either of you, Laura or Kyle, how, if you're in an elevator or if you're at a cocktail party or an elevator, something you haven't been in a long time.
Yeah.
What would you tell someone in kind of a nutshell your organization does?
Yeah. The good old elevator pitch. And, you know, my background's in startups, so I'm unfortunately overly familiar with the short pitch that you have to give to people. But maybe I can start, and obviously, Laura, feel free to jump in and give your own perspective. But really started our Wave in 2018 with the, idea that we wanted to better support survivors and give them a mechanism to anonymously share their stories. And what we found was that there are all these, movements and things that are going on, Me Too movement and all these other sort of trending opportunities for people to share their stories, which are incredible, but they're very public. People are sharing on their social channels and, sharing with their friends and family. And then a lot of people experience these things, and there was more nuance. They wanted to see other people's stories. They wanted to share their own story, but they didn't necessarily want to do so publicly. So we said, well, basically, could we create, we're technology and design people. Could we create a platform where people could share their stories anonymously, but more so than just sharing, could we give them a place to do that and the resources to do that are leaning in the direction of hope and healing? Instead of being sort of a cold platform where people just share content, could we try to lean into the healing components and leverage research to give people resources as they're sharing their stories and finding the things that they need so that they can move past their previous instances of trauma. So that's sort of my take on it. Laura, did you have, your own take or thoughts?
No, I mean, I think that's great. And it's funny because I had met Kyle at a sexual violence conference because unlike Kyle being like tech and design and their team, I am a nurse by training. I'm also a researcher. And so my research was in healing after sexual violence. And so one of my projects when I was interviewing survivors, I noticed this gap where people were really longing for community and really longing for a place to really say their truth and also just process their truth. Because I think sometimes you keep it inside and you don't really even know how to put words to what happened. And so I had stumbled across them on a table, and they were saying, we want to create this platform. And I was like, me too, but I have no skills in design or tech or anything. I'm just like the clinician here. So it really made for a really nice match. But yeah, I would say that's the vision, really to help people tell their stories, but then really have that not be the only step, but then connect them to a community, help people learn from each other what works for them and what doesn't.
So Laura, would you say yourself, you're one of the co-founders? Did you guys all kind of build this from the ground up, or Kyle, was it kind of in the process when you guys connected?
So I was lucky that Kyle had been doing this with his team and setting all the groundwork for about a year before I came in, but I came in right before everything launched. So I was really lucky in that I got a chance to look at the content and as a clinician sort of make my little tweaks and wording and things. But they really laid the groundwork for launching. They already had a launch date and everything set up. So Kyle can speak more to that. But I came in my opinion, like the right time. They laid out all the groundwork and the platform was ready to go. And so I got really lucky.
Yeah. Commenting on that, it's always something that I'm trying to like even think about and figure out myself because, I had the initial like very high level concept, but then I, went to Brendan, who I've worked with on all kinds of other projects, and he's the tech guru. He's just a genius at all of that. And I pitched him this super rough idea, and then we sort of founded the initial groundwork of it. But then, we've grown to a team of eight volunteers, which is insane. Well, we have really like eight core volunteers, and then we've got a bunch of other people that work with us, but 8 people that are there week in, week out for our check-ins and are contributing in different ways. So, I guess if somebody sort of presses me and is like, help me understand who's the founder, like really Brendan and I are like the on paper founders, but this team of 8 and the people that we've acquired and brought in at these different phases have massively changed the trajectory of our organization and of the tools and resources that we've built. So in my mind, really, we're all sort of founders of this fledgling idea that is starting to grow some serious legs. And that to me is just really cool because I never really care what's on paper. I care more that we're getting the best possible people working on the areas that they're good at so that our organization can grow, so that we can do it together and so that we can impact the most survivors.
That's awesome. So tell me, so I'm always fascinated and with kind of the moment. I mean, I say, I don't think you wake up and decide to start a nonprofit. We all know that the business model is innately flawed. Relying on the kindness of others for donations is not usually the strongest business model. And as I mentioned, I'm a nonprofit founder and I'm also executive director of a different nonprofit, not the one that I started. But I understand there's always a backstory. You don't just say, well, I'm going to go to this conference. So I want to hear like, what were the pieces that came together for you for this? And what was that? Like you said you had a high concept, but something happened before that. So what was kind of that moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So in roughly October 2018, someone in my life directly experienced sexual violence, and somebody that I was very close with. And, for me, it was a really difficult period because I was trying to figure out a bunch of different things. I was like, how do I support this person? How do I best help them heal? And even as I'm feeling all of these things, I can't even imagine what this other person is feeling who experienced it firsthand. And then I sort of just was like, I am privileged enough that I have the opportunity, I have skills, I have, time, and I have experience, building companies and building products. So I said, well, I have the capacity to do something here. So I sort of just, this is the time when I was like, okay, well, I kind of got this idea of what if we could create a place where, somebody like this person very close to me could go and see other survivors and get support and find healing resources. And then, over the span of, doing it, different people in space, tried to understand things better. But then I started just kind of pulling people from my life in and saying, hey, you're an amazing designer. I'd love your support on this. If you have time, hey, you're an amazing UX person. And then we found Laura at a conference. So all of these skill sets in these areas that I was not strong in, I said, I have this rough idea. I want y'all to help me mold it. And let's bring it all together into this thing that can help survivors. And then let's try to scale it like crazy. So, that's really where it started. But like I mentioned before, like it really has evolved so much over time with these different people and their levels of experience and things coming to the table. And it's been pretty incredible to see it all come together, even with very little funding. So, and I can comment more on the
name of the game. That's the name of the game.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And
that's the game we play.
Yeah, we've made it work, right? Like I have a network that's, given us some capital donated from, some different organizations that really like to give back. that have given us some capital, pay for servers and get things off the ground. But, it's given us the legs, them giving back and contributing, even if it's not on a work basis, has given us the legs to build this thing out and to move in the direction of sustainability, which is just really exciting for us. So that's a long-winded way of sort of telling our story.
That's awesome. And Laura, obviously you have a research background in all this and you're a nurse, but did this speak to you personally in any way? Or was there something that really drew you to this work, like a backstory that led you into this line of work?
Yeah. So, unfortunately, and I don't know if you feel this way, but being a woman on a college campus, I felt like it was happening to so many of my friends. Were experiencing these sexual violence experiences, but I think what is more complicated is like, what does that mean? There's like different shades of it. Is this considered violence? And so I've watched a lot of my friends and family members process what happened to them and go through different channels trying to find support. So I got really interested in sexual violence, and I said, okay, there's so many people in my life that are struggling to find healing. And a lot of the work, especially in medicine and nursing, is focused on that deficit. Like you have trauma, you have depression, anxiety, and there was so little focus on like the healing and growth aspect. And then it's interesting because I was getting my PhD in nursing, which is also very strange, a doctor nurse or whatever.
Wow.
And then like smack in the middle of my program, I had my own experience of sexual violence. So it was really interesting for me and it's totally okay. And it was interesting because being a quote unquote expert, right? You think, oh, I'm an expert in healing after violence. Like I'm going to be set. I can do all these amazing things because I know what to do. I have all the tools, and it's different when it's yourself. It's a totally different beast. And so for me, it's sort of layered on the personal where it was me, it was my friends, it's almost the world that we live. And so that's why, for me, it's really important to really build that community, because you can often feel like you're all alone if you don't get to share your story in some way.
Right. Oh my gosh. Wow. And I don't know a lot of women that haven't had, as you said, some shade of some experience in their lifetime that is that moment you're like, this isn't okay. This just isn't okay. So I think that I kind of love the way that you say that, because I think that historically, and this is just my context, that people are like, oh, they're victims, and then there's kind of everything else. But really, it isn't two categories. There's 100 shades of what that is. And I think that women understanding that there's shades of that, and that something happened to them, just because they don't fall in that category, it's still something that needs to be healed and processed. So I think that that's so important, and just a message that I don't think that's out there. I don't think I think the context of the topic, I think people think of it very black and white. It's either the extreme or nothing else. And I think that it's really beautiful that you guys are trying to really get all the messages out there.
I think it's been really interesting for us to just see how this affects so many different subgroups of people. It affects women, it affects men, it affects individuals in the LGBTQ plus community. Like it's really permeated through all sorts of different levels of society, which is, incredibly unfortunate. But what that means is that there's an opportunity to reach and support a lot of different people. And I think the other thing that we've learned is that there's so much nuance in healing associated with different people and different experiences and, different areas. Because, if something happens, for example, to somebody who's younger, it might potentially affect their mechanisms of trusting other people, in addition to sort of their thoughts on physical touch and intimacy. So just trying to create some sort of platform that can address and support to the best of our ability and create community around these incidences and find healing and hope through it all, I think has really been a unique opportunity outside of just, individual populations that are affected or might be most highlighted in mainstream media.
Right. No, I mean, I also think that it's so private, that people don't even know where to go to get help. So if they are alone in their room and they're having that moment and they're looking online and they find you, like that's just a lifeline, right? It's just an emotional,
Definitely.
It's like throwing an emotional life preserver to someone that you're just pulling them up and pulling and saving them and bringing them through. So I think that's so beautiful. So what do you think your biggest challenges are in doing all this work? Because there's so many fun ones, aren't there?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. I think the biggest challenge, I think, for anybody doing this kind of work or even nonprofit work is how do you stretch, minimal resources to make the most impact? And,
Amen.
Right. The beautiful part about sort of our organization is because it is a technology platform, it has the potential for massive scale. But, the trick for us in sort of trying to support all these different populations and individuals who have these different levels of need and these, different sensitivities is, there's no one size fits all approach to doing outreach and marketing and trying to support these groups. And we almost have to really push hard to sort of access these different populations that are disproportionately affected. For example, if we have migrant workers that have have larger rates of sexual violence and sexual assault, we really have to, there are certain considerations we have to take where we're translating our platform and we're reaching out to specific subgroups that then support those populations. And then we have to create, for example, curriculum so that the people that are working with these populations can share that this sort of tool is available. And that's just one group. So really trying to figure out scalable mechanisms of outreach to really support all of these disparate groups of survivors is always a challenge, but it's always a really unique and it's interesting to us just to think through creative ways of doing that. And we found, more success in some ways than others. So that'd be the big one that keeps me up at night. Laura, what do you think?
I mean, I agree, but for me, I think as being like the grant writer of the group, it's like trying to get those grants and, having a career in academia where that's all I do is write grants. So I just feel like, I'm doing is writing grants. So yeah, I think funding is, it'd be nice for all the work that people are putting in. It'd be nice if we could, pay some of our staff for their work. And that's not really me or Kyle, but it's like the designers that are doing all of our content and like all of these other people who are really putting in a lot of work. So that's like my thing is the funding. It's always about funding.
That's usually the number one answer. Just so you know, Laura, if we were doing a game show, you would win the grand prize right now because that with the hundreds and hundreds of nonprofit founders I've interviewed, that has always been number one answer is funding. Because at the end of the day, we all want to serve more people. And the more money we raise, the more people we can help. And it isn't really about the money for us. It's about the people that we're serving. But we need those dollars to serve more people. And money isn't usually what drives anyone in the nonprofit space. And yet in the weirdest, most backwards ass way, it is what drives us because that's the only way we can serve.
Absolutely.
So I have a question. So what... I always say sometimes that the bucket gets heavy in this job. There's not always someone to pass the bucket to, and you're carrying it up a hill some days, and we're pulled in so many different directions with funding and donors and those that we serve and boards and, and the list of relationships we manage in order to do this work. And there are days you just think, and there's really no one at the end of the day to hand your bucket to because it's your bucket. But what fuels you both to do this work? I mean, what is it that keeps you persevering on when it's just like, oh my gosh, I've got to write another grant. Oh my gosh, I don't know how we're going to make payroll or oh my God, whatever it is.
Yeah.
What is it that fuels you?
I think for me personally, like I love the ability, like I grew up in a household where my mom has run a nonprofit for a long time, 20 years maybe. And,
I love her.
She's amazing. And, she does work in one of the most hostile environments. Like she does work in North Korea and takes, 4 trips a year and provides medicine and aid and all kinds of different services to the people there that are really suffering. And just seeing sort of like, I grew up in a household that was comfortable. We weren't scrapping over every paycheck or that sort of thing. And it gave the opportunity to do that sort of impactful work, which I think I'm incredibly thankful for. And growing up with that sort of motivation, and then, going to college and getting a degree and not being encumbered with student debt and that sort of thing, to me, it gave me the opportunity to try to leverage my skills and the network that I build to make that kind of impact and to help people, because I'm in a position to do that. And a lot of people aren't. And so I think for me, I always was trying to find mechanisms to do that, and I wasn't always sure how to. And then this opportunity arose, and it just sort of crystallized and became very clear that if I'm able to put together a team of people that are incredibly talented and we're all able to come together, we have the opportunity to make massive amounts of impact in specific areas. And this one, just based on my experience and the experience of those around me, came top of mind. And so honestly, it's just been from day one, we've just been running hard at trying to make that happen. And my hope is that I can continue to do that with this organization and with all the other endeavors and work that I do in the future, because I'm in a position to, and I think it's, there are a lot of people that could use support and help and don't have the means to get it for themselves. And so if we can provide that, that's my ultimate goal.
I love that. So what about you, Laura? What fuels you to keep doing this?
So for me, it truly is the survivors. I mean, I was a mental health nurse for a while. I'm now a sexual assault nurse examiner. And through my research, it's all storytelling based and it's photography based, helping people find healing. And so over the past 4 years, I have met just countless amazing survivors who have given me the privilege of hearing their stories and hearing their struggle. And it's funny, whenever I have to write a grant or something that feels really daunting, I do this this ritual where I will light a candle and just sort of remember why I am doing this. Because when you're filling out the applications and you're doing all the stuff that really wasn't what you really care about, you don't really care about that stuff.
It desensitizes our work, right?
Yep,
it desensitizes our work.
And it's let's bring the survivors in the room with me, the people that are counting on me and our team to really push this forward. And I will also say, just being a part of this team of 8 completely volunteers, people that give their evenings to this work, their weekends to this work, I think that is also incredibly important. If I didn't have the support of these folks who are on, as much as I can't really, carry the bucket everywhere, if I'm really struggling, I could say, hey, Kyle, you hold this for a quick sec. And he can do that. And I don't think not every team has that cohesion that I think we do, which was really helpful.
So when are those moments? Is it hearing the survivor stories or that you've carried that bucket and you've pushed through and you've written that hellacious grant, which I'm ready to do some of those today myself. I'm going to light a candle. But when you've made a difference, I know I've never talked to someone that says, oh, well, I just did da, da, da. Never once have I talked to any nonprofit founder or volunteer, but somehow we've had moments of grace where we know we're this teeny tiny cog in a very big wheel, and it stops us in our tracks, and we're like, I had a little hand in that. And again, it isn't about us; it's about those that we serve. But it stops you, and you realize that somehow you're a part of something bigger than yourself. What are those moments like for both of you?
Oh man. I've got 2 that sort of rise to the top for me, that really sort of brings it home, the work we're doing. One of those moments is we ended up developing, and by we, I mean really Laura and then another specialist we worked with, ended up developing a presentation that we shared with USA Gymnastics, and obviously, everybody's read the press and seen things that are going on. And we were able to share seeing the silent signs of, sexual abuse and just general abuse. And Laura did an incredible job. But I remember I was in the Zoom call helping moderate and support. and a survivor of Larry Nassar popped in and said, hey, just made it clear that they were there and, that they were interested in what we were talking about. And it was just a very, it sort of brought to life all the things that we've heard and the ability to sort of support, individuals who have gone through unbelievably traumatic and difficult things, and sort of just brought that to the forefront of our minds, and was pretty incredible that we, as a tiny, tiny nonprofit, had the opportunity to potentially impact somebody like that. And then the other moment for me was really, we've been doing this campaign, and again, Laura has been really spearheading this campaign with this Instagram account called Unapologetically Surviving, which is an account that's grown from 60,000 to like 140,000, people that follow it, that specifically talks about healing, healing content and supporting survivors and just being a light, sort of at the end of a dark tunnel. And we did a partnership with them where we did FAQ Friday, and they're still going on, where we really, Laura and our team takes these questions that survivors have and other individuals have, and we answer them. What is coercion, and how do I disclose trauma to my friends and family? And we've seen like 10,000 people liking some of these posts and engaging with it. And it's just crazy to see that, a simple started as a cold email that said, hey, we love to work together. We think we've got some knowledge here and we're really good at design and stuff. Can we share some of our work with y'all? And they've been overwhelmingly gracious with us and giving us a platform to do that with, their extremely high population, their massive population. Right. And then those people then circle back to our platform and tell their story and get resources there. So it's just been a very just beautiful example of the potential impact, and we've really, I don't know, those are the two that stand out to me. Laura, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. For me, it's really been the FAQ Fridays. I mean, and Kyle touched on this, but the amount of like comments people saying like, oh my gosh, like this is me. Like you're speaking right to me. We started with me, I think, putting some questions that I kind of had when I first started experiencing these things. Like, how do you manage triggers? And have you ever had that moment where you're not really sure if it actually happened? Do you ever doubt, like, if your experience is severe enough to seek help for, and blah, blah, blah. And so I think for me, seeing the traction grow and seeing people having the same, like, we'll have a post on Monday saying, submit your questions, and we'll have like 10 of the same question, it's like, we're all looking for the same answers. And so I think that participating in that has been really, helpful to see really that we all are experiencing different things, but there is some common thread between all of us, no matter how alone we feel.
Right. I love that. Oh my gosh, that's got to feel so rewarding. I mean, because it's all about community, right? What we do is all about creating connection and community. That's really the essence of what nonprofits do, is bringing people together to help each other to solve something. I mean, that's at the core of what we do. So being able to build a big community like that in such a short time is so incredible. Okay, so back to the evil word that I can't stand, and it's not grant, but it's close. Impact. I have a love-hate with the word impact. I totally understand that donors and foundations need accountability. I understand that it helps us to kind of hold ourselves accountability and helps us as a self-measurement tool. I think those things are great about impact. But to your point earlier about, how do you measure someone who has gone through trauma and you're healing them? How do you measure that? I run a youth leadership organization. How do you measure leadership? And some of these foundations and donors hold us to the impact of our work. And we know every person that we help is impacted by what we do. But if you guys had to say what you think your impact has been, whether it's in people served, dollars raised, a story, a moment, what would you say the impact of Our Wave has been, of the organization? How would you best describe your impact?
Yeah, well, I can speak from kind of a quantitative standpoint. We've seen, I think, somewhere to the tune of like 10,000 views on our stories. Our content these days, we're getting probably hundreds of thousands of views between the reshares on our content that we're doing specifically. And then, we're actually in the running for some really large opportunities that would allow us to multiply that level of impact. So
Wow.
I think that between the content and the platform that we have created, we're probably, somewhere between 100 and 200,000 survivors that we've been able to access and engage with and support in some capacity, whether that's content or giving them a platform.
Wow.
But obviously our aim is to increase that. And one of the things that we're doing right now are that we're actually finding a mechanism so that we can white label our core story platform, so that if a branded organization, or actually what Laura and I literally talked about before this call was, we're seeing some of these university accounts pop up where an account will pop up, people want to share their stories at a specific university, and there's normally a moderator, a single person that started this account to make an impact. And so we see this massive opportunity to say, hey, we've built all the technology, the infrastructure, and the ability to review, and you can make this a Cornell or, NC State or another university or another organization-specific page. And so we're going to be rolling that out in the next few months, and we think that will dramatically increase, the amount of impact that we can create, hopefully into the millions, because individual organizations can then create their own instance and give survivors the ability to tell stories. So these are rough numbers and they're not perfect, but that's sort of what we've been looking at so far. And that's really where we're lucky as a technology organization, that the number one thing that we have to our advantage is that scale and that ability to very quickly expand our efforts and reach that many people. Laura, what are your sort of thoughts on impact levels and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny because Kyle is so much like, he's the quantitative guy. I'm the qualitative guy.
Right. Which I love. I'm the qualitative one too.
Yeah. And,
give me that narrative, Laura. Give me that narrative.
I'll give you the narrative. So I think with social media specifically, the direct messages, I do a lot of the social media managing, depending on what their people are looking for. And so I just pulled up one now because it's happened a couple of days ago, and it made me feel so good. But this person said, I just wanted to say how grateful I am to have found your page. I've struggled with what happened to me, so I'd really like to say thank you. I know you don't know me, but just existing, you make me feel seen. And I feel like that is just something that when you think of impact,
oh my God,
the numbers are so important, but thought of being seen when you feel so alone is what keeps me going.
Oh, you're making me cry here, Laura. You're making me cry. That's so beautiful. Oh my gosh. That's, to me, that's impact. That's impact. The grants, schmants. I love and hate them, but, that's the impact, right? That's the life you've changed.
Yeah.
You've changed a life. Oh my God. That's so beautiful. So if you two could dream any dream for our wave, what would that dream look like?
Oh man. Well, here's the executive director part of me, and here's the, thing you've heard again and again. My dream for our wave would be to have a full-time staff that can run at this, all day, every day, and increase our outreach efforts and scale this thing and build features and functionality and build, our vision really long-term is, what if we could create this online platform where I'm a survivor and I come to tell my story, and I could be at all kinds of different stages of my healing process. But what if this platform, based on the way that I told my story, could understand where I was in the healing process and know what resources to give me and know what communities to sort of put me into, so that I can then move past my trauma and support other people. And there's all kinds of really cool stuff that I won't get into the weeds on with technology and our ability to, leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning to find certain keywords and to match people. Anyways, boring technology stuff. But the potential impact that you then have is a totally scalable global product that can meet people where they're at, that give them communities and support, from the trauma that they've experienced, whether that's in the future sexual violence or any other form of trauma, and can connect them and give them the opportunity to move past their trauma and to make change and to, go out in their community and attempt to keep these incidences and things from happening in the first place through education and through everything else. So, that's the grand vision. And I think we're so close yet so far from that being a reality, but that in my mind is where we want to go.
Right.
Laura, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you spoke to it. I think really, for me, it's creating a place, basically a virtual healing space. I think so often we rely on people to find their own therapist, to battle with their own insurance, and all of this is really important to healing. But I notice more and more, particularly young people, they're looking for things online. They're craving that online community, that self-exploration from home, for folks that have barriers to do some of these more ritzy self-care things or really expensive therapies. And so if there's a way we could increase access to healing opportunities, I think that would be my grand vision.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, it sounds like you guys are on your way to doing that. Okay, so the big questions, and I'll ask them one at a time, but what life lessons, I know it's only been 2 years since you guys have started this, but what life lessons have you learned since starting Our Wave? And what life lessons have you learned just from the experience of starting this organization?
That's a great question. I think internally it's been incredible to see how people, even if you literally cannot pay them, how much people want to give back and contribute to help other people. I think that's been really surprising to me. I mean, even just outside of our core team, the number of volunteers that we have that come to us and say, hey, I'd love to give back and contribute in some way. I'm, skilled in this way or not skilled at all, but I just want to help. It's been really inspiring to just see how much people want to contribute. And I think that, people can contribute to a cause and to help other people. And then for me personally, I would say just from a purely execution and team standpoint, it's been really amazing to see what we can do with absolutely no resources, and to figure out how to be scrappy and how to how to just create something from absolutely nothing and to have it be just so purely, good, and to have such strong team dynamics. And I don't know, it's just been really amazing to work with this team, and honestly refreshing some weeks, even though we're dealing with such heavy subject matter. Yeah.
That's so awesome. So what about you, Laura? What have you learned from starting this?
So I think the main thing that I learned is that it's possible to have an idea that you think fills a need and to go out and do it. Like Kyle said, with not a lot of support to start. I mean, I think for me, as me in the clinician role, I noticed this gap, and I was like, I see this, but I'm just a nurse. I can't do this. And plus, my professors will kill me if they hear that I said I'm just a nurse. Because being a nurse is amazing, but
it's a big freaking deal. It's a big deal.
But it's like, I don't know how can I do this? And so I would say the value of a team and finding a team and finding people that really have their heads in the right place when the mission really aligns. That is really important. But two, no matter who you are or where you're at, if you have an idea and you think it feels a need and it's really going to help people, take a chance on yourself, because I feel like you can do so much good for other people.
I love that. And that is such the truth. Such the truth. We have 1.7 million nonprofits in the United States, and people who just care and they want to help someone. That's all they want. They just want to help someone else. And typically they want to make sure what happened to them doesn't happen to the next guy. I would say 80%, maybe 85% of people I've interviewed have had something happen in their life that triggered them to just roll up their sleeves and say, I'm going to do what I can to make sure this doesn't happen to somebody else. And then I would say 15%, maybe 10, have had a near hit or a close call with something, and gratitude propelled them to do it. But I think that everyone has the ability to do it. It's just getting out there and doing it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so last question is, how has this journey changed you? Like really changed you? Like how have you changed since you've done this, since you've begun? Like what is different about you now than before you knew each other? Like what has changed, internally?
I think for me, the biggest one would probably be just empathy and understanding all of the different things that people experience at different points in their life, and then seeing how that impacts them in so many different ways that I could have never imagined. Really getting a deeper level understanding of trauma and, all of the components that the negative things that can come alongside these events happening, and then seeing how that affects people's lives. And, it just makes you kind of think back and say, holy cow, like, this person that maybe treated me this way in, I don't know, high school or something, maybe they were dealing with some of the worst things that somebody could have possibly been dealing with. And so it just sort of, I think, makes you more empathetic and thoughtful and listening, makes you want to listen to people more, because these incidence rates and this trauma that people experience happens a lot more than you can imagine, and it affects people differently. So really learning to be empathetic and to listen and to understand nuance and to try to support, these different individuals who have experienced different things has really been, it's been a unique opportunity and has been really beneficial to me, I think, personally.
And Laura, what about you?
So I think for me, there's like two things that it has helped. One is I think more internal, and I think one is more external. But on the internal, for me, being a nurse, a teacher, a researcher, I've been in mostly spaces where it's like I'm holding someone else's trauma. And so like I try to really detach and like, it's not about me. It's about you.
Right.
I'm holding space for you. And this opportunity has really allowed me to like kind of look inward in myself and think about like, if I'm going to be like leading this effort, I got to really do my own internal work to make sure I'm in the right place, that this is sustainable for me. And I also, if I'm telling everyone else, like, being a survivor is not something you should be ashamed of, like, I got to practice what I preach here. And so the fact that I'm even like saying this on this podcast, like, this happened to me, and it doesn't make me any weaker. It doesn't make me any less competent. It doesn't make me a worse researcher, a worse nurse. In fact, I think that there's a part of it that actually helps me understand in a serious way. So I think that piece for me personally has been really beautiful. But on the other side, I think connecting with folks like Kyle, who maybe didn't experience it himself, but have that drive to give back. I've just been shocked with the people who maybe haven't had that in their own personal life in terms of direct harm, but still feel compelled to come forward and help. And so like people say like, look for the helpers, but like seeing people who are just like motivated by their own internal things, wanting to help, has really given me a lot of hope for the world in a time when the world feels so dang dark. So I would say that.
Oh my gosh, Laura, you're killing me. Like, cause that's it. That's the holy grail, right? That's why we do this. That's why we write these salacious grants, why we carry these heavy buckets, why we do this. Like we just do this for hope, to help other people, to move the world forward a little bit better, one person at a time, one Instagram comment that you've seen me at a time. That's why we're here. That's why you're on vacation, Kyle, in a truck on this phone right now, because those people matter, and somehow our lives are connected to theirs in this crazy magical way, that we've been able and blessed and privileged to be able to walk a journey with other people. And it's the most remarkable work. It's the hardest work, I think, and one of the other reasons I love to tell stories like yours is because I don't think people realize how hard this is. It is really hard work. It's really hard, but it's so beautiful, and we're so blessed to do it. And it's so fantastic getting to hear your stories. So tell me lastly, like, how can we support you? Where can we find you? What's your Instagram handle?
Yeah.
Give us all the contact. Where can we donate?
Oh yeah.
Always important,
All
right?
the plugs. Yeah. So our site is live. First and foremost, we would encourage anyone, honestly, to check out our website, which is just ourwave.org, OURWAVE.org, and to just engage with the content, to understand kind of what we're about. But you can also read all of these different stories from survivors and engage with them. And if anyone and everyone feels comfortable sharing their story, obviously they can do the same there. So I think that's the most important. We would encourage people to follow us on Instagram, which is just OurWave Stories, at OurWave Stories on Instagram. And I think it's the same for all of our social medias. And to see the sort of content that we're putting out and engage with it. And we hope it's helpful for different people. We do have a newsletter on our website that we encourage people to follow. And then obviously, as any given nonprofit, we have our donate button, and we encourage and thank anybody who's willing to donate to us. But I'd say the last area that we would love any and all support is we really want to work and continue to expand our network and our group. And as we go after grants and stuff, obviously the goal is to pay people and that sort of thing over time. But we really would encourage anyone and everyone to reach out to us if they're interested in volunteering and they have ideally we really would love to have people with specific skills. I'm really good at marketing. I'm really good at, AdWords. Right. I'm really good at, some of these areas, but we encourage anyone and everyone, and we will try to work with anyone and everyone.
Thank you. And thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing, and thank you for being so open, so honest, so raw, and so amazing. The work you are doing is so beautiful, and I just on both of you for personally having something happen to you both, and taking that pain and using it as fuel for good. There's just nothing better. And it's just you are my heroes of the world. You are the people who make this world a better place. And what a privilege it is just to talk to you and hear your story. So thank you for sharing it.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Charity Matters podcast. I so enjoyed talking to Kyle and Laura about what it takes to start a business that changes people's lives. To learn more about modern-day heroes like Kyle and Laura, reach out to us at charity-matters.com or connect with us on Instagram at Charity Matters. If you enjoyed our conversation, we'd love this if you share this with your friends and family, and feel free to leave us a 5-star rating as well. Remember that together we can make a difference, one small act of kindness at a time. Thanks for listening. See you next time.